fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there. It's G.I. Joe against Cobra the enemy, fighting to save the day. He never gets up.
Crept from the 80s. Hello, welcome everyone to another pandemically erotic episode of It Crept from the 80s. Today is wow, it's special, isn't it? Because look who's back.
Hey!
It's Sir Bobby Heckman.
Dean Heckman?
Dean
Also
Heckman.
known as?
Dobby.
Hello.
Bobbers.
How are you? And I'm so extremely excited once again to talk about V.
Here's our V extended cut episode. No, today, folks, as we have teased and threatened many times.
Yes.
Finally, I am on a little vacation, seeing my good pal of 20 years.
20 years and going.
Bobby Heckman, and we have finally, we're finally here and able to talk about something that is very near.
Might be 20 and a half.
20 and a half.
Because we probably met in January after that.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
We're close to 21 years.
Oh, yeah. We will make 21.
So, we've talked about, of course, many properties.
Very much.
That we love in the 80s, and this is no exception. So, who better to talk this franchise with than somebody who I've known to be in love with this franchise since you were, what? Wee lad?
Yes, since I live and breathe since 7 years old, 1983. Came out 82, but 83 is when I'll tell the whole story.
So here we are, folks. It Crept from the 80s presents G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe. I am extremely honored that you held off G.I. Joe for doing it with me.
Well, yeah, we talked about it forever.
Yes, and I just feel like
the Joe episode.
Oh,
gotta be with Bobby.
Episode. Yes,
gotta be with Bobby.
I mean, G.I. Joe changed my world, my life. Like, where should we start? From the beginning?
Well,
what do you want to do?
I think we're going to go through my history with Joe because it's extremely minuscule, and then we're just going to turn it over to you.
He likes dreadnoughts. Anyway, my story.
Yes. All right, friends. So, as you know, especially if you were born in the 70s and your entirety of your childhood was the 80s, we were inundated with non-stop amazing kids pop culture and just pop culture in general. Pop culture was a huge, amazing. I mean, the 80s was the pop culture decade.
Yeah. Yes.
So I had a million different things thrown at me that I gravitated towards and loved. Star Wars was my first, that really has always been my number one thing. Star Wars, Kenner Toys.
Anybody born in the mid to late 70s is a Star Wars. If you're a boy, you were Star
born
Wars.
into it.
Yes.
You were born into Star Wars.
Absolutely.
And so I was that, and then I was He-Man, and Transformers, and Mask, and that, and then Ghostbusters, and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. All in there, there was this plucky little franchise from Hasbro that has been around forever. G.I. Joe. Now, yes, I watched the cartoon. I might have had some of the comics here and there, and I did have some toys. But G.I. Joe did not latch on to me like Transformers, like He-Man, like Star Wars.
It was less fantasy.
It had its moments.
It was probably that. It was less fantasy.
I don't know what it was, because I really enjoyed, I loved how you didn't know if Cobra Commander was a snake. You didn't. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, that's only the movie.
what I'm saying
yeah.
is, you didn't know. You didn't know. I mean, why is Serpentor? You know what I mean? Like, there are weird things within the G.I. Joe
Right.
mythos that I definitely gravitated towards. And like I talked to you before,
Mm-hmm.
I loved that they weren't guns per se. They were lasers. You know.
This is specifically the cartoon.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm talking about the cartoon.
Yes.
So there were those things that I did like, and there's characters that I did like. I liked Duke, you know. I liked Gung Ho. I liked Shipwreck. I liked Scarlet.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the Baroness. I liked Destro.
She was feisty. For
Cobra
me.
Commander. Of course, I loved Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. I mean, every kid did.
Yeah, of course.
And those are the toys that I had. I didn't have a plethora of all these Joes, and believe me, there are so many Joes.
Right.
Probably more than any other toy line.
Yeah, there's
Like,
at least
there has to be like 300,
300
something.
Yeah, between
different
Joe's and
toys.
Cobra.
Well, that wasn't me. You know,
Yeah.
that was our buddy Greg Martin, who went. Look at him.
This shows you how many characters there were from 82 to
Look him,
94.
look him. Mark Belomont. You have seen him on the Toys That Made Us.
Toys That Made Us.
He is a vintage toy aficionado. He's written many books on 80s toys, Transformers, Star Wars. He has that 80s toy book, the specific.
I just
80s
have
toy
this and the Star Wars one.
book. And then
I
there's
love
this.
them both.
But anyway, so yeah, those were my. I had maybe a few of the small vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I never had any of the big vehicles because it just wasn't that big for me.
Right.
And I would play Star Wars with the G.I. Joes, and so I would use
They were the
and I would
same
put the
size,
G.I.
yeah.
I would put the Joes in the Star Wars vehicles, and that was much cooler for me than like a tank or something like that.
Right.
But the main guys that appealed to me, as you said,
Zartan and the Dreadnoks.
yes, those I don't know what it was. I mean, Zartan.
They were colorful. They
I
were just a
just-
colorful
Yeah, they had a
Gang.
weird. They were speaking different languages. and-
Australian.
Yeah, it was just they were
in English. Yeah.
mean and brutal and as much as you could on a television show,
Right.
kids television show. But they were just different and fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
But Zartan was like, I loved that he was like the master of disguise. Like
Yeah.
and specifically the toy. The toy to me was so cool.
Mm-hmm.
The changing.
It's just funny that, you said that he's the master of the skies, and that's what he, it said on his, his package and in the comics and everything. But it's funny because we both have been recently rewatching the cartoon, and it's like every time somebody's like tearing off their disguise, it's usually the Baroness.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's like a guy she's pretending to be, and it's like, well, you've already introduced Zartan. Why aren't you using Zartan for this
Yeah.
person pretending to be somebody else? It's always like Zartan Baroness or somebody else. But anyway, I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's my Joe. It wasn't a thing of hate or anything like that. It just, it just didn't clutch my sack like the others did. And again, we were inundated with so much. And I think I just went more towards anything and everything that was more fantastical and out of this world, and
Right.
even with Mask, it gave you. I felt like, well, I'm getting the best of both worlds. I'm getting Transformers,
Absolutely.
I'm getting G.I. Joe, and
Oh yeah.
There
once,
you go.
Once Mask came about, I was all about that. I think as soon as Mask came about, I didn't even care about well, I was talking to him earlier about GoBots. I was always a big GoBots fan. Probably because they were cheaper and
like
just
both.
and I only had like 10 Transformers. But it's like once Mask came about, I was like, oh, I'm getting like,
2 in 1.
yeah, exactly. Joe and transforming vehicles.
Vehicles.
And stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, throughout the years, I've, it's sort of been there. G.I. Joe has been there, but it's never, it's never been something where I was like, even when I started recollecting, it was just, I want to just get the guys I had and not go apeshit over it. Because it just, I don't have that like you do. That wasn't my connection. Whereas everything else I already mentioned, that was far more palpable and buoyant for me.
And for me, Joe was everything. All those things that you mentioned, I enjoyed also. But if the choice was like, oh, you can get a Transformer or Mask over a Joe thing, I always picked Joe. I had more Joe than anything else with vehicles and figures and everything.
I also felt like because I had a friend like Greg Martin, I didn't need any Joe.
You could go
because I would just go to Greg's house and anything Joe was at my fingertips.
Yeah.
This kid Greg had anything and everything G.I. Joe on one side of his room, and on the other was Transformers. And I had some Transformers. I didn't have a lot of Transformers because comparing a lot, I mean, I wish, maybe I can talk to Greg and see if he'll give me a picture to pop up here because wow.
Is his room still like this?
He does have a toy room specifically that is just packed.
Yeah.
Insane. So, yeah, it's always, I've always thought it was cool. Never put it down, never, it wasn't one of those things. So I had my brush with G.I. Joe, but it just didn't grab on.
Right.
And this is, I'm sitting next to an Uber fan, so he can...
Yeah.
I will just
I might scare you how much of a fan I am. And I'm going to try not to get into crazy comics lore and stuff like that, because that stuff just will choke me up. Yeah. Because that'll have to be a 5-hour part 2 episode.
Yeah, this might be part 1 of the G.I. Joe episode.
Yeah, I got too much to say about it.
Because I know Casey will want to talk, Chad will want to talk, so maybe we can do another one down the road.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing.
For more Joe,
Yeah.
Joe.
And I know they're kind of unfamiliar about comic storylines, which is just one giant soap opera where like characters died, and in the G.I. Joe comics, when they died, they stayed dead. There was no bringing back to life like, comic book, superhero comics and stuff, but which would shock an 8, 9, 10-year-old. I was like, whoa, wait, what happened? And there's reasons behind that too.
Bobenstein,
yes. Let me start at the beginning.
Why did you start from the Wii years?
The Wii years?
The tiny little lad. Years? Heckman years.
All right, let's take us all back to, as he said before, if you were born in the late 70s and a boy, you were basically a Star Wars kid. It all starts with Star Wars.
Really? I mean...
That's what it all starts
as. It's the first toy, other than like, say, stuffed animals or
right.
Sesame Street type stuff.
Yeah.
Little figures like that.
Yeah, or Muppet stuff.
Yeah. Muppets, yes. Definitely Muppet stuff. Star Wars is 100% the first real toy I can ever remember as a 4-year-old.
Yes.
And I've told the story before, that's for a different time. But that was it.
They were the perfect size to have a bunch of them and take it outside and play with, and like have a bunch of characters and good guys and bad guys, whatever. It was Star Wars was it for a long time. Now, in 1982, when this line of G.I. Joe came out, I began seeing my cousins and maybe certain friends that I was hanging out with, first and second grade, 1982. I started seeing these G.I. Joe figures at friends' houses and my cousins' houses, and I would look at them and go, man, they have like joints and like
Yeah.
you know, they had like
Whoa.
movability where they can actually hold their weapons, as opposed to Star Wars figures that just had
Yeah.
arms and legs that did this. So like it helped with imagination and story when you could actually pose them and play with them like as, you know, realistic people.
It was a revelation because even for me, whose mind was blown when He-Man came out, because
They just stood like this.
yes, but just the idea that you could
Twist them.
twist them and they would punch, and they would have these like
Yeah.
extra things. I was like, oh, what? Oh, you know, that is amazing.
It is.
But then when you get a G.I. Joe in your hand and you can, the legs and arms and everything can go all over the place, you're just like,
yeah.
oh, the possibilities are
Yeah.
endless.
The possibilities with elbows and knees.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like
You can actually look.
they
you
could
can
crouch
make 'em
and
look like
sit down in their
kicking.
vehicles.
You know.
Yeah, as opposed to the speeder bike where like their legs went straight out.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like this always looked fun. Even as like a 7-year-old, you were just like, this looks funny, but you know, whatever. You're having fun playing
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
But so I was still obsessed with Star Wars figures, and then Return of the Jedi was coming out in 1983, and it's at the exact same time that I was getting Star Wars figures. Of course, I was loving them. It was my favorite thing ever. It's to this day, it's still Return of the Jedi is my favorite movie of all time,
Hell
basically.
yeah, me too.
But somewhere in the summer of 1983, and definitely in the fall of 83, when the new school year began, which was for me 3rd grade, and they released the G.I. Joe cartoon miniseries, the 5-episode thing on TV that September, and I was just like, oh my god, this is
Joe.
This is Joe. Also, at the same time, I started getting some comic books. And Marvel, who did the original G.I. Joe, they put out these 3-issue packs, like that were in a bag, and you can get like, and they would mix them up.
Yeah.
And it would be like Spider-Man, Fantastic Four,
Oh, yeah.
and another issue of, you know, whatever, something else, X-Men. But then, like, there was, like, one that had, like, 3 G.I. Joe comics inside. And that was the first time I got G.I. Joe comics. And because I started getting interested, I saw the cartoon, I saw my mom or dad bought me these 3 comics in this pack. And I opened it up, and, like, the world even expanded more than that mini-series cartoon. And I was just like... And there were random issues. It was, like, issue 7... 16 and like 17 or something like that, and I was just like, and I could see that, you know, they were picking up, I was missing something.
Yeah.
So my dad, by the end of that year, went back and bought every back issue for me at that point.
It's amazing.
And already at the end of 83, those first few issues like cost so much money, which was probably $10 or something like that. But, so, I pushed through with Star Wars, and I still saw my friends collecting G.I. Joes, but I was a very shy kid, where my parents would, like, have to, like, pull, like, they'd see me, like, at KB or Toys R Us, looking at these toys. They're like, do you want some? Like, you're allowed to ask if you want a toy.
Yeah.
I was not one of these kids that you see screaming for toys and like, I want this and this and that and this.
Yeah.
I was always so content and happy about what I had which was the Star Wars toys and some other things, that I didn't want to, like, you know, push it. You know, like, it was very, I kind of want
You were
that.
a content kid.
I was totally content. And I was an only child, and I was always content playing by myself a lot. Like, I would go to friends' houses and everything, and they would have toys, but I never, like, played a lot with other friends, because I maybe would want to take the story in a different place than they would. So I could remember a lot of friends' houses, and, like, they'd be playing over there on their bed, and I'd be on the other side of the room creating my own thing, and I don't know, that's just how it was. I just, you know, but we would enjoy each other's toys. Be like, oh, you want to play this? Go ahead, sure. We're just not playing together. Maybe you know, we were all too control freaks with our stuff. But loved my Star Wars stuff, was really getting into G.I. Joe with the comics and the TV show. And then 1984 just changed everything in my life. When I say everything that I love doing now stems from the year 1984. So many, I mean, he knows.
Yeah,
it's my favorite year of movies.
A very eerie thing.
Yeah, the nexus of the universe is 1984.
The connection between him and 1984 is an odd, spiritual, supernatural connection.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Like, everything, like, between the movies that came out that year, discovering, like, it's probably the first music I ever, like, you know, like Michael Jackson's Thriller and other albums I was just starting to buy. Like, so music was opening up for me. Movies, TV at the time, all the cartoons that were out, and G.I. Joe. Like reading those comic books and seeing all the conflict going on in those comic books. And as a 7 or 8 year old, some of it's probably something I shouldn't be reading, because it was like, especially when there's like some like military talk I'm not understanding, but there's like the conflict between Cobra themselves was just so entertaining to me. It's like, oh, they're not all just bad guys working together, they're at each other. Which is probably why, like, so many things are disorganized. Like, Destro would be against Cobra Commander, and Major Blood and the Baroness would be planning a hit on Cobra Commander using his own son. It's like so, like,
they did that
crazy.
with Transformers. They did that with
He-Man. Starscream and Megatron.
Starscream was always trying to usurp, you know, and get anybody he could to overthrow Megatron.
Right.
And all the like Beastman and Trapjaw and Evil Lyn were always like conspiring against Skeletor to take down Skeletor.
Right.
You know, that adds a little more something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just like good, evil, fight.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Because there's times where they would even go over on the good side and be like, "You help me do this," you know.
Yes, and I'll help you defeat whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was honestly I first became aware of that kind of type of conflict through V, which, you know, I talk about it. And it's like, whoa, not every bad guy is a bad guy. They're joining resistance and stuff like that. But 1984, those comic books blew my mind, and it opened me up to comic books. So, and seeing at that same year Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, I was introduced to Spider-Man. Like, I probably knew Spider-Man, but I didn't know, like, through that cartoon.
1981. It's the first cartoon that
But then they were rerunning it a lot by that time.
100% remember.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
So it opened up my world up to Marvel in general, 1984. Also, Larry Hama, who created all the characters for G.I. Joe that Hasbro threw the designs at him, and he created the personalities and everything that went with it. Wrote almost every issue of that Marvel run from 82 to 94, became a huge inspiration for me. I was just like, he's my favorite writer, you know, like, so I would write my own script. My very first script I wrote inspired by him, and it was a G.I. Joe story, of course. So in 84, I got my first G.I. Joe toys. I was with my mom in a department store, and I think it was like summer of 84. I was like, you know what? It's time I start collecting this. Still having all my Star Wars stuff and whatever else. Were GoBots out at that time?
Yes.
So
GoBots, 84. Yes, they came out the same year as Transformers.
84. All right. So I had some of those too.
And, Transformers beat them.
But I just love GoBots. Maybe it's this little size thing that I could play with them all over here. So
Great
we were in the
cartoon,
department
too.
store. What?
GoBots.
I like the cartoon.
Challenge of the GoBots.
Yes.
Hanna-Barbera.
I'm a Hanna-Barbarian also.
Good.
So my mom and I were in the department store, and I was like, you know what? I want to get a vehicle as the first thing. And this is what I got. The G.I. Joe Shark, which flew and was a water. It was like a spaceship and also an underwater vehicle. And it came with probably the worst G.I. Joe character who barely moves. He only moves his arms. And I'm not going to take him out because I have it all rubber band up. But this is not my original. I got this with him a few years ago in Pittsburgh. We found this great toy shop, and this was
D&E Collectibles.
D&E Collectibles, and this was only $20. And it was complete with all the stickers. Everything worked. There's missiles that come on the bottom. They're in a can over here. Even came with a pump to give him
the pump
so he could float on water and stuff. So I got this, and I had to get a bad guy. So the Cobra Soldier was the very first figure I got. This also is not my original. I got this not too long ago, so I was happy. So that began, all right, here we go. KB, Toys R Us, let me get these G.I. Joes. And then the second miniseries was out by that time, in September of 84, which went into the regular cartoon TV series. So I was watching that every day after school and loving that, and also at the same time reading the comics, and that was the most amazing thing ever. And so my family took huge notice of this and said, all right, we are going to get you a lot of G.I. Joe stuff this Christmas. By then I was like 8 years old, and I still believed in the Santa thing, but kind of played it cool. But they knew that I was over it. I saw Gremlins that summer, come on, and Phoebe Cates says, and that's how I found out there was no Santa Claus. And I was probably like, no, there isn't no Santa Claus. I don't know if that
I was believing in Santa probably till I was 12 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, there's the spirit of Santa, or just knew that there was a Santa?
I don't know, and I don't care. To this day, as a 43-year-old, I believe in Santa Claus. I'm
the idea of Santa.
I love Christmas, and the whole idea. I tell River, of course you don't believe in Santa. Of course you know Santa isn't real, but believe in the spirit of Santa.
That's
Keep the cheer and joy alive, because it's part of the fun of Christmas. Mm-hmm. It's not all of it, but it's part of the fun of Christmas. So
absolutely,
Santa's real in here.
Definitely, and in here.
Continue.
So here was the deal my parents made with me, because we lived in a small place.
They said, "Hold out your hand," and then they got a switchblade, and they
made
sealed a blood pact with you. And you're like, "Mother,
no." So my aunt wanted to give her kids a really good Christmas, and they didn't have a lot of money to spend on toys and everything. They were just getting by or whatever. And so what my dad and mom said, I was like, all right, well, we see you're kind of growing out of Star Wars toys by 84. And I was like, well, yeah, because I'm getting so into Joe. So that was like taking over. I didn't not love Star Wars anymore, don't get me wrong, of course I did. But at the time, that's the end of the saga, the end of the story. So I was just, you had your toys, you played with them, and I don't know, I was just getting into Joe. So they said, well, how about this? We take your Star Wars toys. I know this is going to break your heart.
Yeah, but in the picture that we were about to show,
Yes.
you're still getting some Star Wars stuff.
Yes, which is weird. I don't get why there was a few Star Wars toys
It
in
was
there.
magical. I would,
Maybe they felt bad. Maybe they felt bad getting rid of all the Star Wars toys.
Anyway, go on. 'Cause
But I
you're
kept-
about to trip people out.
Yeah. So they took all my Star Wars toys except a few figures and maybe 2 vehicles. Maybe that's why I was hanging on to a couple of things. And they basically sold it to my aunt. She must have gave them a couple $100 or something for all this stuff to give to their kids, to my cousins. And then gave me the best Christmas ever. Picture? There was, there's the G.I. Joe hovercraft, the giant thing. I had the base, which isn't in that picture, but whatever. I had big vehicles, little vehicles, a whole bunch of figures, and there was like the Star Wars Sarlacc game and a TIE fighter, and that was just something I could like hang up and like just have a couple of Star Wars things that I kind of kept. I only remember keeping Chewbacca and a couple of things, but I remember like I had the Darth Vader carrying case, and I remember kind of like saying goodbye to my Star Wars figures at like 8 years old. I knew this was, you're going to a good cause, and I remember holding my Gamorrean guard and going, I am gonna miss these, and just like, just kind of moving their limbs and just going, all right, well, goodbye. And I just closed the case. They took my Millennium Falcon and the speeder bikes and all the toys and everything that one day I'll recollect back, and gave my cousins a good Christmas. What happened to those toys is a crying shame. Because those cousins we nicknamed Animal 1 and Animal 2.
Oh, man.
Yes, they were vicious. By January, February, those toys were destroyed. But whatever, I was in my G.I. Joe zone.
The Joe zone.
I was in the Joe zone, and I absolutely loved it. 1984 was such a key year for me for all of this stuff. And it basically continued until 1989. And at 12, I think I was 13 years old when, oh wait, I'm sorry. Yes, I was 13 years old and growing out of the toys, which I know depresses him.
I was still doing it.
Yeah, 13, I was just kind of, I was so into like movies and horror movies.
I was too.
I remember the day I was sitting at my desk in my bedroom. He's heard the story so many times. And I had my figures and just sitting at my desk and just trying to come up with a story. And it just wasn't there anymore. And I just was just like, this is not it's time to put these away, So I put them in, I carried them all in this like giant bowling ball case. And I took them to my dad's house. He got me a pellet gun for Christmas. I shot them. Exploding plastic pieces all over the backyard. And
can you believe this?
I know. I don't know where my mind was, but I was so into like playing guns with my friends, and we just ran around, and I just like, I'll just blow them up. Of course, I regret that. And I'm trying to rebuy a lot of what I had lost and, fall back in love with it all over again to display.
I think I've talked about it before. There's an episode where Casey and I sort of talk about, when we actually started collecting as opposed to playing.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll say that. Like, same thing, 13 years old.
Yes.
Yes, I wasn't like, doing that at 13. But I began collecting.
Right.
I began keeping things in their packages and putting them on display. So that's what I'll say.
Right.
I didn't do like the, I've said this, before, but I never stopped doing anything that I loved just because I was growing older, because of girls or anything like that.
Right.
I continued to do and enjoy all the things that I loved, and if you couldn't get with that, then you didn't need to be around me.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to change for anything. You either like me or you don't, and that's how it was.
Right.
So I can't relate in that aspect to a lot of people who were like, I'm a teenager now, and I gotta put these dumb things away.
I don't feel like I was like that. I'm not saying you. No, I definitely
there's a lot of people who did that.
It's just that my interest went somewhere else. It was going into movies and music, still writing and everything. And I always stayed with the G.I.Joe comic book until the end. So it was always still with me as a teenager.
Yeah.
Just
movies, music, toys, all that stuff was still a thing for me going into my teens and into my 20s and 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
So it's never gone away. I definitely, when I was 13, I was even more making films and trying to do it a little less backyardy and a a little more scripted type shit.
Yeah.
So
and
I guess
was the same way.
I guess
I was making
aspect,
movies in the early 90s, our teenage years.
I was, trying to take it a little more serious, as much as you can for a 13, 14.
You know what I think, thinking back on it, I think a lot of it had to do with space, too, because...
Yeah, when we went to space.
Yeah, absolutely. In the G.I. Joe shuttle.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. Or an Explorer.
Those were weird times, man.
They were. I think it had more to do with, I've always lived, when I grew up collecting G.I. Joe and Star Wars and everything, it was a small apartment that my parents lived in. And then when we moved from there in 1986 and moved to my grandparents' house, my room was only so big. So it's kind of like, well, I don't have any more room for this because I'm replacing it with all this, new stuff, shelves of videotapes and props and stuff for movies I'm making,
posters, whatnot.
Posters cover the wall. So it's there's the toys are just kind of there's only so much room for the closet.
Maybe I blame my family because for me
constantly
thinking I have enough room for everything when in actuality I don't, because so I had my room, all right, and then once, probably when I was hitting those early teens, they built an addition to the house, which just happened to be right next to my room. So what happened was a door was built from my room over here that went into this other room that was suddenly a what?
You had a playroom.
I had my room, which had toys, posters, all this shit, and then you just walked into this other door, and then we put a couch up there, we put a TV up there. That's where all my movies and videos and everything went. And there was a little part of the room that's where my aunt would write, because she was a journalist and everything.
Okay.
But it ultimately became my other room. So when my bedroom was filled, I just filled the other room.
Yeah, see, that's it.
And maybe I'll put up some pictures as I'm talking about this too, but you can see them. And they're in a lot of the early vintage Sievage stuff. It was just like, I didn't have an excuse then. It was like, well, I have 2 rooms, so I can fill them. You know.
See, and that's probably, I was probably conscious of like, that like, I don't have a lot of room in my bedroom growing up in those 2 places, so I don't want to ask for a lot of toys.
Yeah.
So, but 85 to 86, I mean, not 84 to 86, it was just, you know, a lot of G.I. Joe stuff. And then as 87, 88, 89 came, I was like dwindling down, just getting figures. A lot of the vehicles were just like, I just don't have room in my bedroom for this stuff. It's great when you go outside and you could, you know.
I think even 88, you know, when the Turtles came out, I don't even think I was actually playing with them. You know,
you just liked them because they were cool.
It was more
the cartoon or
ripping them out and putting them on the shelves and posing them in like fighting positions and shit like that.
And I did that with certain toys too.
Stuff like that.
Like when the Terminator toys came out, like 91 or something, and I thought those were kind of cool, and I bought like 2 of those. And
yeah, I had some of the RoboCop stuff in '89.
Yeah, I never got those, but I thought they were cool.
And all I did was, you know, put them in positions.
Yeah,
but, you know.
So I guess technically I never stopped buying toys. It's just like you said, you're collecting them, you put them up on a shelf. No. But the G.I. Joe stuff and oh, sorry.
No, you can show it off. What is that?
That's
Bobby?
it's the Hiss tank, and there's Major Blood sitting here with the Hiss driver. But
it's an awesome vehicle.
Yes, it is. It's one of my favorite. I mean, Cobra, I always feel like had the cooler vehicles.
Well, the bad guys were always cooler.
Yeah, the bad guys were always cooler. But I feel like, man, I want to talk about G.I. Joe comics, and that should just be a whole other episode. But I just want to, like, for you G.I. Joe fans out there, or say you're fans, and just know the cartoon and the toys, there's a whole new world to be explored with the comics. I mean, you think you know? No,
you have no idea.
Just knowing the toys and the cartoon, you're only knowing half the battle.
Story.
Like, let me tell you. I mean, oh hi, babe.
That's fine.
That's my wife.
She
She loves hearing about G.I. Joe.
I mean, she wakes up going, "Yo, Joe!"
And I was like, Cobra! No, she's a sugar nerd. Well, for months now, she's had to listen to G.I. Joe when I come home from work, and I just pop on a cartoon. Has to listen to them yelling "Yo, Joe" every 5 seconds.
Cobra!
Cobra! And I have a favorite story of that, if she wants me to tell it.
What story?
No, I'm not going to get into it. But anyway, the G.I. Joe comics. Let me tell you something about the G.I. Joe comics. There are issues that made me cry because, my favorite character of everything, like comics, everything, is Snake Eyes. This guy. And I love and adore the mythology of Snake Eyes through Larry Hama's G.I. Joe Marvel run.
Is that what that is?
Well, this is the...
Is it a collected work or is that a newer?
This is the 30th anniversary hardcover edition of issue 21.
Okay.
And 21, as a lot of fans would know, is called Silent Interlude. And it's the silent issue where there's no dialogue and it's just told through the pictures. And it's the introduction where Snake Eyes goes to rescue Scarlet. And it's the introduction of Storm Shadow.
Do we ever find out why he doesn't talk?
Yes, you do.
Look at that, it's signed.
And it's signed.
Signed by John Stamos and Jimmy Van Brunt. Which is irrelevant,
Actually, I don't
but
even
he was
know.
on the street and he was just like, you know what?
Larry Hama signed this in 2015. I love when he signed a whole bunch of my comic single issues, and he always writes the date on there. I can't read what he says, but he says thanks again. Great guy. Yes, you find out in an early mission. Well, if you want some Snake Eyes backstory, as brief as I could do it. Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, and Stalker were in Vietnam together. And they were all like as tight as brothers, especially Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. After Vietnam, this plays out in very specific issues of G.I. Joe, the flashback stuff. Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes were as tight as brothers, and he did. There he is. Snake Eyes did speak when in Vietnam with his brother there. When Snake Eyes, there it is, and that I bought recently because I never had the original Snake Eyes because, like I said, I didn't get into the collecting until 1984. That's a 1982 figure. So my Holy Grail Snake Eyes is the one that came with Timber. This one.
I'll do close-ups of all this stuff.
Sounds good. The story basically goes after Vietnam. Snake Eyes comes home, and he's waiting for his family to come pick him up at the airport. Well, his sister, twin sister, and his two parents are killed in a car accident while he's waiting at the airport. Like he didn't go through enough horrible stuff in Vietnam. Hawk delivers the message to him at the airport.
Yo, bro.
Yeah, said, your family was just killed in a car accident. He didn't have anywhere to go, so he took up Storm Shadow's offer to come to Japan and be part of his family. And I'm going to get emotional because it's just so beautiful.
Let them find out the rest of the story.
Well, okay.
Don't spoil anything.
Yeah, all right. Well, a lot of stuff happens. And it's fantastic. And Larry Hama had always made Storm Shadow a good guy in the comics. Storm Shadow is good. And the only reason why he was in Cobra is to find out who killed his uncle, which was blamed on him, Storm Shadow. So once he found out, that's another whole story. I will not reveal who the killer of Storm Shadow's uncle is, because
it's Ernest.
Find out in classic G.I. Joe volumes that are $100 a piece. No, you could find them, but oh man, I tried to recommend him reading some old G.I. Joe.
And I'm going to.
And you will.
It just seems like it's going to be a real expensive adventure.
Yeah. The mythology and the stories really pick up after like issue 20. And on forward, And this went for so much online, yeah. G.I. Joe Volume 3. Introduction of Storm Shadow, Zartan, the Dreadnoks, Duke, Roadblock, all that stuff happens in this volume from issue 21.
The fight for freedom
rages on! But this is a great jump-on place if you want to read the comics. Also in 2001, Image and Devil's Due, writers Josh Blaylock, Chuck Dixon, there was a whole bunch, picked up the story where Larry Hama left off in 1994, 2001 to 2008, and actually completed a whole story. This is a great, reinstated the Image. They're now in volumes called Disavowed. So if you can find those, go for it. And this G.I. Joe, Snake Eyes Declassified. These 6 issues are everything you need to know about Snake Eyes in 6 issues. Retelling all the stuff that Larry Hama created, plus adding a little bit more.
Lots of sex.
And violence.
Lots of, pedophilia.
Stamos makes a very important cameo.
Indeed. Snake Eyes' father.
Yes, exactly. But I freaking love these
And he's got a vast collection of the comics.
Yes.
We're just not going to bring them out. But.
No, but there's so much twists and turns that happen throughout the years that will blow if you're just like an okay like if you're just a fan of the toys, casual G.I. Joe fan. I can promise you, you'd become a hardcore.
I gotta get into this.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because it's like some things aren't revealed. Like they might reveal the origin of Snake Eyes. Oh, by the way, he on one of the first G.I. Joe missions, he was rescuing Scarlet and everything, and a helicopter explosion happened, and basically burnt his face off and vocal cords. That's why he doesn't speak.
That's cold-blooded.
Throughout the years, he got plastic surgery, and his face is fine after a while, but he still never regained his.
And it was revealed that he was Cher.
Absolutely.
Dolly Parton.
And it's funny that in the cartoon, it was Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow always remained kind of like one-dimensionally bad, and they always like paired his fighting up with Spirit, the G.I. Joe tracker guy. It's like, I guess because they both fight with honor.
Yes,
and stuff.
there were many episodes where Spirit was crying because there was garbage on the highway.
That's right. And Storm Shadow had this, "Well, Spirit, we will fight again." The voices are so great. I'll always love Destro's voice. And him, there's one episode of the cartoon where Cobra Commander's ultimate plan is to put his own face on the moon. What is this cosmic graffiti? I love it. You spent billions on this cosmic graffiti? But,
Cosmic Graffiti is the name of my new band.
yeah, oh man,
It's a
it should be.
gothic reggae band.
It's not the band that Zartan. You're going to go on tour with Zartan's band, Slither. That's another episode of the G.I. Joe cartoon that we need to see. But as the cartoons went on,
they toured with the Misfits of from Gem and the Holograms.
Oh my God, yes. What about the Copycats?
The Copycats
From Kid Video.
Yes, and Kid Video. It was a wild tour, guys.
Oh my
It
God.
was debauchery. I mean, you wouldn't even.
It was the first Warped Tour.
Yeah.
It's funny rewatching the cartoons because almost the whole second season I don't remember even watching, because I think I was so balls deep into the comics that I was like,
inferior.
yeah, like even as a 9 or 10-year-old, I
Nine.
was like, this cartoon's for children. I'm watching mayhem in the comics and like deep, mythology. Like who knows where my mind was at the time, but I think because the cartoon characters were so different than what I was reading, that I was just like, I just don't care, and like I didn't. I mean, they got the Serpentor story kind of accurate, that was compared to the comics, which is that he's like a mix of DNA from 9, like Genghis Khan and like Alexander the Great. Like there's like DNA from all of those. In the cartoon, there was like all the great leaders of history's past, but then they took like Sergeant Slaughter's DNA also and threw it into Serpentor, and that's like, okay, interesting. in the comics, they take Storm Shadow's piece of Storm Shadow's DNA and throw it in there. But it's weird. And by the way, Sergeant Slaughter, I just wasn't. I'm sorry if I offend wrestling fans everywhere. I was not a wrestling guy, and I know a lot of you love wrestling and G.I. Joe, and probably Sergeant Slaughter was your favorite character because of that. But to me, I did not care about Sergeant Slaughter at all. Even when he popped up in the comics, I was just like, okay, he's just kind of there, and he just yelled a lot, and I just he didn't do anything for me. And I was happy when he wasn't in the comics anymore, and he definitely wasn't in the new. This is probably like a copyright thing with him. And even in the cartoon, I thought he was in a lot of the cartoon. He's only in like a total of 10 episodes or something. But, you know, and they kind of focus it around him, and that's probably a contractual thing.
So G.I. Joe is, I mean, throughout the years has sort of always been with you.
Always been with me. We've been through some ups and downs.
When did you decide you wanted to start to recollect the toys?
Kind of recently. Well, when G.I. Joe came back in comics, 2001, that kick-started Marvel collecting again. And I got into all the Marvels. Plus the Marvel movies were like coming up with Spider-Man and the X-Men. We were talking about that the other day. Like how this all like re-sparked all of that in me. I mean, it was always kind of there, but like it just... So by 2007, there was the 25th anniversary where they started bringing out like new versions of all the classic characters of G.I. Joe. And he'll show you during his haul video. The next haul video of what he got.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these figures were great because they had the same card. They, you know, had the same card again. There you go. The back of it was exactly the same from the 80s. They just had even more articulation and character to the, you know, more detail.
Did they have more like accoutrements?
Yes, and more weapons, and even came with stands to stand on. So I started recollecting those 2007, the 25th anniversary, but I only bought I probably bought like 20 of them, 20 or 25 of them. Only. But I was selling at conventions, and I got rid of. Then I just kept like my favorite characters, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, and you know,
Fart Hammer,
and John Stamos, and
Jimmy Van Run,
Cobra Van Run. So probably 2007, and by then it was the end of that G.I. Joe comic book run, which ended fantastically with like a World War III scenario, and it's one of the greatest. Written by Mike Powers. It's so freaking good. I can't even find it if you can find it. So I don't think I stopped. And then the G.I. Joe movie came out, 2009, and they were putting out more figures and stuff like that. And the movie...
G.I. Joe will return after these messages.
When